The Alpha rejected me. Then the legendary Lycan King chose me instead. Before we step into today's unforgettable story, please take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our newest stories. It only takes a second, it's completely free, and your support helps us continue creating powerful, emotional adventures just like this one. We truly appreciate every single one of you. And before the story begins, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We always love seeing our amazing community gather from across the globe. Now, without further delay, let's begin today's story. The moon goddess never mistakes a soul, but sometimes she lets the whole world reject it before revealing its true destiny. Elena Ashcroft had repeated those words to herself so many times that they no longer sounded like hope. They sounded like a farewell. The ancient moon-choosing ceremony filled the heart of Raven Hollow with silver lanterns, polished stone, and hundreds of wolves dressed in their finest clothes. Every unmated alpha, beta, and omega stood beneath the glowing full moon, waiting for the sacred bond that would shape the rest of their lives. Laughter floated through the crisp evening air, blending with soft music and whispered predictions about which couples would be chosen. For most families, it was a celebration. For Elena, it felt like the final page of a story already written. She stood near the edge of the gathering in a simple pale blue dress that had belonged to her late mother. It wasn't the newest gown in the crowd, nor the brightest, but she had carefully repaired every loose thread with her own hands. Around her neck rested a small silver pendant engraved with a faded crescent symbol that no elder in her pack had ever been able to identify. They always dismissed it as an old family keepsake, nothing more. Elena had learned long ago not to ask questions no one wanted to answer. Her heartbeat quickened as Alpha Damien Blackthorn stepped toward the ceremonial stone. Tall, confident, admired by nearly everyone, he had been the future leader of Raven Hollow for as long as anyone could remember. Their names had been connected since childhood through whispers of a possible future bond, and although Damien had never shown her real affection, Elena had quietly believed the moon goddess might still have a plan she could not yet see. The silence across the clearing became almost sacred as Damien's voice carried through the night. I reject this bond and the future it represents. Every word seemed to freeze the air itself. His silver eyes settled on Elena without anger, without kindness, almost as though she were a stranger standing in his way. Elena Ashcroft deserves a path that does not include mine. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Some wolves lowered their eyes with sympathy, while others exchanged satisfied smiles, as if they had expected this outcome all along. Elena felt every heartbeat echo through her chest, but she refused to let tears appear. Her mother had once told her that dignity was the one treasure no one could steal unless she surrendered it herself. She lifted her chin, offered a calm nod, and answered in a voice softer than the wind, yet steady enough for everyone nearby to hear. Then I release you with peace. The sacred bond dissolved without thunder or spectacle, only a quiet ache that settled deep within her heart. Murmurs spread through the crowd almost immediately. Some called her unfortunate. Others whispered that no alpha would ever choose an omega who carried neither influence nor remarkable strength. Elena heard every word, but she simply turned away from the ceremonial stone and began walking toward the forest trail beyond the lanterns. Behind her, the celebration slowly resumed as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet high above the valley, hidden beyond the clouds where no ordinary wolf ever looked, an ancient silver light awakened for the first time in centuries. Far beyond the borders of every known pack, upon a forgotten mountain where legends claimed no living ruler remained, a pair of luminous silver eyes opened in absolute silence. The legendary Lycan King had felt the breaking of a bond that destiny itself had never intended to exist. The cold night breeze followed Elena Ashcroft as she walked away from Raven Hollow, carrying nothing except a small leather satchel, the silver pendant around her neck, and the quiet determination that had survived every disappointment life had placed before her. The sounds of laughter from the moon-choosing ceremony slowly faded behind her until only the whisper of towering pine trees remained. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stay where every familiar face now looked at her with either pity or relief. Above her, The full moon disappeared behind drifting clouds, leaving the forest wrapped in soft silver shadows. Hours passed as she followed an old trail few wolves still remembered. Her feet ached, and the cool mountain air settled deep into her lungs. Yet for the first time in years, she felt strangely free. There was no expectation left to carry, no impossible dream waiting to disappoint her. Just another sunrise somewhere beyond the trees. As dawn slowly painted the horizon with pale gold, Elena noticed a narrow stone bridge crossing a quiet stream. Sitting beside it was an elderly woman wrapped in a weathered gray cloak, feeding small birds from the palm of her hand. The birds showed no fear. They rested on her shoulders as though they had known her forever. Elena offered a polite smile before attempting to continue, but the old woman spoke without looking up. "You are walking away from a life that was never meant to be yours." Elena stopped. Her heart skipped a beat. "Do we know each other?" she asked gently. The woman finally raised her eyes. They were clouded with age, yet somehow filled with remarkable peace. "Not yet," she answered with a faint smile. "But I have waited many years to meet the girl wearing that pendant." Instinctively, Elena touched the small silver crescent hanging against her chest. "This belonged to my mother," she whispered. "No one has ever recognized it. That is because those who remember its meaning have almost vanished from this world." The old woman slowly stood, her movements careful but graceful. From inside her cloak, she removed a tiny wooden box carved with symbols almost identical to those engraved on Elena's pendant. Her hands trembled as she placed it into Elena's palms. "This was entrusted to me long before you were born." Elena stared at the box in confusion. "Who left this for me?" The woman looked toward the distant mountains where the morning mist clung to the highest peaks. "Someone who believed the forgotten blood would awaken again when the world needed hope more than power." Elena carefully opened the box. Inside rested an ancient silver ring marked with the same crescent, surrounded by tiny stars worn smooth by time. The moment her fingers brushed its surface, the pendant around her neck became slightly warm. Not hot enough to hurt, only enough to remind her that it was alive in a way she had never noticed before. Elena looked up in surprise, but the old woman did not seem startled. Instead, she nodded as though she had expected exactly that. "Do not wear the ring yet," she warned softly. "Its purpose has not fully awakened, and neither has yours." Elena wanted answers. She wanted to understand why her family had never spoken about any of this. She wanted to know why a simple pendant suddenly felt connected to something much older than Raven Hollow. Before she could ask another question, a distant sound rolled across the mountains. It was neither thunder nor the howl of an ordinary wolf. The deep, haunting call carried a quiet authority that seemed to stir the forest itself. Every bird fell silent. Every branch became still. Even the flowing stream appeared calmer for a single impossible moment. The old woman's peaceful expression changed into quiet reverence. "He has awakened," she whispered. "And after centuries of silence, the legendary Lycan King is finally searching for the one destiny refused to forget." Elena stood motionless as the final echo of the mysterious call drifted across the valley, leaving behind a silence unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was not the uneasy silence that followed rejection or disappointment. It was the kind that made the entire world seem to pause, as though every living creature had instinctively recognized the arrival of something older than memory itself. The elderly woman slowly closed the wooden box and gently folded Elena's fingers around it. "There are stories," she said quietly, "that every alpha pup hears before sleeping, but they are no longer told because too many believe they were only legends. They speak of rulers who existed before the first packs were formed, guardians who answered only to the moon goddess herself. They were called the Lycans." Elena searched the woman's face for some sign that this was merely another comforting tale, but there was no trace of fantasy in her expression. Only certainty. "If they were real," Elena asked softly, "where have they been all this time?" The old woman looked toward the distant northern peaks where thick clouds embraced the mountaintops. "Waiting," she replied. "The strongest guardians do not rule because they desire power. They appear only when balance has been lost." Before Elena could respond, movement caught her attention across the stream. 3 enormous gray wolves emerged from the trees, their silver eyes fixed on the elderly woman. Instead of growling or showing aggression, Each lowered its head respectfully before retreating into the forest without making another sound. Elena had never seen wild wolves behave that way. Even more surprising, the old woman barely acknowledged them, as though such moments were perfectly ordinary. "They know," the woman whispered. "Nature remembers what people forget." Far beyond the peaceful valley, inside the grand council hall of Iron Crest, leaders from 12 neighboring packs gathered around an ancient stone table carved with the history of their ancestors. The room usually echoed with confident voices and proud debates, but today every alpha remained unusually quiet. At the center of the table rested a crystal filled with shimmering moonlight. Without warning, tiny fractures spread across its surface before the entire crystal dissolved into glowing dust. A wave of astonishment swept through the hall. Elder Marcus, the oldest advisor among them, slowly rose from his chair with trembling hands. "It has happened," he breathed. "The ancient moon seal has broken." Several younger alphas exchanged confused glances. One finally asked, "Does that mean the prophecy was true?" The elder nodded without taking his eyes off the fading light. "It means the legendary Lycan King walks this world again." No one spoke after that. Even the proudest leaders understood the weight of those words. Every kingdom, every alpha bloodline, every law they had built over centuries traced its history back to stories they had dismissed as myths. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles farther north, hidden among towering cliffs untouched by any known pack, a solitary figure stood at the edge of a mountain overlooking endless forests. He wore a dark traveling cloak that moved gently in the wind, yet nothing about him suggested the arrogance often found in powerful rulers. His posture was calm, his breathing steady. Around him, snow-white wolves rested peacefully, their watchful eyes reflecting complete trust. As the breeze shifted, it carried with it a faint, familiar scent that had not existed in centuries. The man's silver eyes slowly lifted toward the southern horizon. They held neither surprise nor excitement, only quiet recognition. "So you have finally awakened," he murmured. One of the white wolves stepped beside him and looked in the same direction. Without another word, the mysterious ruler began walking down the ancient mountain path, each measured step carrying the quiet certainty of someone following a promise made long before any living soul could remember. Elena remained beside the quiet stream long after the mysterious woman had disappeared into the forest as silently as she had appeared. She searched the nearby trail more than once, convinced the woman could not have traveled far, yet there was no trace of footprints in the damp earth, no broken branches, no sound beyond the gentle rush of water over smooth stones. It was as though the forest itself had welcomed the stranger home. Holding the carved wooden box close, Elena continued north, guided only by instinct and the faint warmth that still pulsed from the silver pendant resting against her heart. The morning gradually brightened, filling the towering pines with golden light, and for the first time since leaving Raven Hollow, she noticed how beautiful the world truly was when she no longer feared being judged by every passing glance. A family of deer crossed the trail without panic. Tiny blue birds gathered along fallen logs, singing cheerful melodies that echoed through the valley. Even the cool breeze carried the comforting scent of wildflowers instead of uncertainty. Near midday, Elena heard a soft whimper somewhere beyond a cluster of moss-covered boulders. She paused immediately. The sound was quiet, almost hidden beneath the rustling leaves, but her heart urged her to follow it. Carefully pushing aside low branches, she discovered a small silver-furred wolf cub lying beneath the roots of an ancient oak. One of its front paws was trapped between two weathered stones that had shifted during the previous night's storm. The little creature struggled bravely without growling, its bright blue eyes filled more with confusion than fear. Elena slowly knelt several feet away, speaking in the same gentle voice her mother had once used to calm frightened animals. "It is all right. I am not here to hurt you." The cub stopped moving and watched her carefully. After a long moment, it gave a tiny nod that seemed almost impossibly human. Elena smiled softly. "Thank you for trusting me." She examined the rocks before carefully lifting the lighter stone away with both hands. It took all of her strength, but the pressure finally released, allowing the little wolf to pull its paw free. Elena immediately noticed there was no serious injury, only a slight swelling. She removed a clean cloth from her satchel, dipped it into the cool stream nearby, and gently wrapped the paw to keep it comfortable. The cub remained perfectly still throughout the entire process, occasionally tilting its head as though studying her every movement. When she finished, it surprised her by touching its nose lightly against her hand before sitting proudly beside her. Elena laughed for the first time in many days. You must belong to someone who is very worried about you. Before the cub could react, several powerful scents drifted through the trees. Moments later, 4 tall warriors stepped into the clearing wearing dark cloaks embroidered with a silver crescent unlike any pack symbol Elena had ever seen. Their expressions remained calm, yet every movement reflected quiet discipline rather than intimidation. The tallest among them looked first at the cub, then at the neatly wrapped paw, and finally at Elena. His eyes widened ever so slightly before he lowered his head with unmistakable respect. None of the men reached for the cub. None spoke harshly. Instead, the leader placed his closed fist over his heart and said in a measured voice, "You showed kindness before asking for identity." Few still remember that lesson. Elena blinked in surprise. "I only helped because he needed it." The 4 warriors exchanged silent glances, and the youngest among them smiled with visible relief. The little silver cub happily trotted toward them, but before leaving, it looked back at Elena and gave a playful bark that sounded almost like a promise. As the mysterious group disappeared into the forest, none of them noticed the faint silver glow beginning to spread across the ancient ring hidden safely inside the wooden box. While far ahead on the northern trail, a solitary traveler paused for the first time in hours, his silver eyes closing briefly as though he had just felt an invisible thread gently pull at his soul. The afternoon sun slowly drifted west as Elena continued along the narrow mountain trail, but her thoughts remained fixed on the strange encounter she had just experienced. The respectful bow from the mysterious warriors made no sense. She was an ordinary Omega with no title, no powerful family, and no place to call home. Yet those disciplined strangers had looked at her as though she carried something worthy of honor. She reached into her satchel and carefully removed the small wooden box. Resting beneath the protective cloth, the ancient silver ring shimmered with a faint glow that had not been there before. Elena frowned. She had not worn it, exactly as the elderly woman had instructed, but somehow its light had grown stronger after she helped the little silver wolf. Before she could examine it further, the pendant around her neck became warm once again. This time the sensation spread gently through her fingertips, filling her with an unexpected feeling of calm rather than fear. As evening approached, Elena found shelter inside the ruins of an abandoned stone chapel overlooking a peaceful valley. Wild ivy covered much of the weathered walls, while colorful flowers had pushed their way between the ancient stones, transforming what had once been forgotten into something quietly beautiful. She gathered a few fallen branches, lit a small campfire, and sat watching the dancing flames while the stars slowly appeared overhead. The silence invited memories she had spent years trying to ignore. She remembered every moment she had questioned her worth because others measured strength by status instead of character. She remembered believing that being chosen was the only path to happiness. Yet as she looked back over the past 2 days, she realized the moments that had brought her the deepest peace had nothing to do with being accepted. They came from choosing kindness when no one expected it, offering compassion without asking for anything in return. Her mother had been right all along. True dignity did not wait for permission. Far to the north, the 4 silver-cloaked guardians knelt before the solitary ruler who had recently descended from the ancient mountains. The little silver wolf happily transformed into a cheerful young boy no older than 8, his bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "She helped me before she knew who I was," the child said with an innocent smile. "She never asked whether I belonged to a great house. She only wanted to make sure I was safe." The guardian standing beside him bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, everything the prophecy described continues to unfold." The man known only through forgotten legends remained silent as he studied the glowing horizon. His silver eyes reflected centuries of quiet wisdom rather than pride. Finally, he asked one simple question. "Did she ask for a reward?" "No, Your Majesty." "Did she seek recognition?" "No." A faint smile touched his face for only a moment. Then her heart has remained untouched by ambition. Inside a hidden sanctuary beneath the northern mountains, elders gathered around an immense circular table carved from Luminous white stone. Ancient symbols engraved across its surface suddenly awakened, sending gentle streams of silver light through every line. One elderly woman placed both hands upon the glowing carvings and closed her eyes. A forgotten verse, preserved only in whispers across countless generations, quietly returned to her memory. When the forgotten moon shines upon the heart that chooses compassion before power, the first blood shall awaken, and the king who carries the oldest promise shall no longer walk alone. Every elder exchanged solemn glances. None celebrated. They understood that ancient promises always carried great responsibility. Back inside the ruined chapel, Elena drifted peacefully to sleep beneath the stars, unaware that the silver ring resting inside the wooden box had begun tracing delicate patterns of moonlight across its surface. Outside, unseen by any ordinary traveler, a magnificent white wolf stood silently atop a distant ridge watching over the quiet valley until dawn, guarding not a queen, nor a warrior, but a young woman whose greatest strength had always been the kindness she believed no one had ever noticed. The first rays of dawn spilled across the valley as Elena awoke to an unfamiliar stillness. Even the morning birds seemed to wait in quiet expectation. She stepped outside the ruined chapel and breathed in the cool mountain air, noticing that the silver pendant against her chest had grown warm once more. This time the feeling did not fade. It pulsed gently like a steady heartbeat, guiding her eyes toward a narrow path climbing through towering evergreens. Trusting the strange instinct she could no longer ignore, Elena followed the trail until the forest opened into an ancient clearing unlike any place she had ever seen. Massive white stones formed a perfect circle around a mirror-like lake, and delicate silver flowers covered the ground despite the cool season. The air itself carried a peaceful energy that made every anxious thought seem smaller. As she stepped into the clearing, the ancient ring inside the wooden box shone so brightly that soft silver light escaped through the carved seams. Elena slowly opened the lid, watching in amazement as the glow reflected across the calm surface of the water. At that very moment, footsteps echoed from the opposite side of the lake. A tall man emerged between the ancient trees wearing a dark traveling cloak that moved gently with the breeze. His silver eyes were calm, thoughtful, and impossibly familiar, as though they had watched countless generations pass beneath the same moon. White wolves walked several respectful steps behind him, yet none attempted to stand beside him. They followed not because they were commanded, but because they trusted him completely. Elena instinctively straightened her posture, unsure why her heart felt both peaceful and overwhelmed at the same time. Before she could speak, the 4 silver-cloaked guardians she had met the previous day appeared from the surrounding forest. Without hesitation, every one of them lowered to one knee. Even the cheerful young boy she had rescued, now dressed in elegant silver robes, bowed with sincere respect. Elena looked from one face to another in complete confusion. The mysterious traveler did not acknowledge their bows immediately. His attention remained fixed on Elena alone. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he walked forward until only a few feet separated them. Instead of expecting her to kneel, instead of demanding loyalty, he slowly lowered himself onto one knee before her. The clearing fell completely silent. The guardians stared in disbelief. The young prince's eyes widened with joyful surprise. Elena instinctively stepped back. "Please," she whispered, "you do not have to do this. I am no one important." The man looked up with a gentle smile that carried quiet certainty rather than pride. "You are mistaken," he answered. "Titles are given by kingdoms. Worth is revealed by choices." Elena searched his face, struggling to understand why someone who inspired such reverence would kneel before a woman rejected only days earlier. He continued softly, "When my people seek a soul worthy of trust, we do not begin by asking how strong they are. We ask how they treat those who cannot offer them anything in return." His gaze briefly shifted toward the smiling young prince before returning to hers. "You answered that question before you ever knew it had been asked." The silver ring lifted gently from the wooden box without anyone touching it. It floated between them, surrounded by soft moonlight, while the ancient symbols engraved upon the white stones awakened one after another. The lake reflected countless shimmering stars, although the morning sun had already risen. One of the elders who had quietly arrived with the guardians drew a slow breath and whispered with awe, "The first recognition." Elena looked back at the kneeling traveler. "Who are you?" she asked. He rose gracefully to his feet, placed one hand over his heart, and answered with calm humility, "My name is Kale Draven. I am the last keeper of the oldest Lycan blood, and I have spent many years searching for the woman whose kindness awakened a promise that even time could not erase." Elena stood quietly beneath the ancient white stones, her thoughts racing faster than her heart. Kale Draven's words echoed through the sacred clearing with a calm certainty that somehow felt more convincing than any speech she had ever heard. He had not spoken like a king demanding obedience. He had spoken like a guardian honoring a promise. The silver ring slowly settled into Elena's open palm, its gentle light fading until only the delicate crescent engraving remained visible. She looked from the ring to Kale, searching for answers hidden behind his peaceful expression. "You said you searched for me," she asked softly. "But how could someone you never met know I existed?" Kale glanced toward the ancient lake, where the water reflected both the morning sky and countless shimmering stars that should not have been visible beneath the rising sun. "Because your name was never written in our prophecy," he answered. "Only your heart was." Elena frowned in quiet confusion. One of the elders stepped forward carrying an old scroll protected inside a crystal case. The parchment appeared impossibly ancient, its edges softened by time, but its silver writing still glowing faintly beneath the morning light. With careful hands, the elder opened the scroll and began reading. "When the crowns of pride forget compassion, when power is mistaken for greatness, and when the forgotten daughter chooses kindness before glory, the oldest promise shall awaken beneath the first moon." The elder slowly lowered the scroll. For generations, many believed these words described a queen born into greatness. We were wrong. The prophecy never spoke of rank. It spoke of character. Elena lowered her eyes, struggling to accept that strangers seemed to understand her better than she understood herself. Kale gently continued. "Long before the first Alpha Kingdoms were established, there were two sacred bloodlines blessed by the moon goddess. One was entrusted with leadership, the other was entrusted with balance. The Alpha Kings built civilizations and protected the packs. The Lycan Kings remained hidden, appearing only when wisdom became more important than strength." He paused, allowing the quiet breeze to carry his words through the clearing. Over time, history remembered the crowns but forgot the guardians. Legends became stories. Stories became myths. Elena looked toward the surrounding wolves resting peacefully beneath the ancient trees. None appeared restless or aggressive. Every creature seemed connected by trust rather than fear. "Why did your people disappear?" she asked. Kale's expression grew thoughtful. "Because true guardians know that endless power eventually invites endless conflict. My ancestors chose silence over domination. They believed the world would one day need an example greater than authority. They waited for the moment when someone would remind every kingdom that compassion is not weakness." The young prince smiled brightly before adding, "That is why father said your first choice mattered more than your name." Elena looked at him with surprise. "Father," the boy laughed softly, "I forgot you did not know." He hurried to Kale's side and proudly slipped his small hand into the king's. "I am Rowan." Elena's eyes widened as she remembered the silver cub trapped beneath the fallen stones. "You?" Rowan nodded enthusiastically. "You helped me before you knew I was the prince of the Lycans. Everyone else would have recognized my family crest. You only saw someone who needed help." Elena smiled warmly, her eyes filling with quiet emotion. For the first time since the rejection ceremony, she realized that losing one future had quietly opened the path toward another she could never have imagined. Yet even as peace settled over the sacred clearing, the ancient ring in her hand pulsed once more, brighter than before. High above them, hidden beyond the clouds, a second silver light suddenly appeared beside the morning sun. Every elder slowly lifted their eyes toward the heavens. One whispered with growing concern, "The second moon has awakened. That has not happened since the age of the first kings." Kale remained calm, but his silver eyes reflected a quiet understanding. "Then the forgotten history is returning," he said softly, "and with it, truths that the world has been unprepared to remember." The appearance of the second moon changed the atmosphere within the sacred valley, Yet no fear spread among the Lycans. Instead, every elder quietly placed a hand over their heart in silent respect, as though greeting an old friend whose return had been expected for generations. Elena watched the extraordinary scene with growing curiosity. She had spent her entire life believing strength meant standing above others, but everything she witnessed here revealed a different truth. Respect was not demanded. It was earned through humility, wisdom, and trust. Kale noticed the questions in her eyes and gently gestured toward the peaceful lakeshore. Together, they walked away from the gathering, while Rowan remained happily speaking with the elders. Neither of them hurried. The silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward, broken only by the gentle sound of water touching the ancient stones. After several moments, Elena finally spoke. "Everyone keeps acting as though I have already accepted a destiny I do not understand." Kale looked across the shimmering lake before answering. "No one here believes your choice has already been made." Elena stopped walking. "Then why did you kneel before me?" Kale turned toward her with the same calm expression that had never once carried pride or expectation. "Because respect should always come before requests." His answer surprised her. She had expected speeches about fate or ancient traditions, not something so simple. Kale continued, "Many believe the oldest Lycan bond is a force that cannot be resisted. That belief is wrong. My ancestors abandoned that path centuries ago." Elena listened carefully. "You mean the stories about destiny are not true?" "Destiny may open a door," Kale replied, "but only the heart should decide whether to walk through it." He reached into the folds of his cloak and carefully removed an ancient silver medallion bearing the same crescent symbol that appeared on Elena's pendant and ring. "This is the crest of the first king. According to our oldest laws, I could invoke the ancient bond today." Elena looked at him with surprise. "Then why have you not?" A gentle smile appeared in his silver eyes. "Because love that is commanded is not love. Trust that is demanded is not trust. I have waited many years for destiny to reveal you. I can wait as long as necessary for your answer." Elena felt an unexpected warmth rise within her heart. Since childhood, she had watched wolves compete for influence, titles, and approval. Even her rejection had been decided without anyone asking what she truly wanted. Yet standing beside Kale, she realized he had asked for nothing. He had offered only freedom. The realization carried more weight than any royal promise ever could. They continued walking until they reached the edge of the lake, where the water reflected both the morning sun and the mysterious second moon still glowing high above. Elena quietly admitted, "After the ceremony in Raven Hollow, I believed being rejected meant I had no value. Now I wonder if I simply spent too much time asking the wrong people to define my worth." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes life removes the voices that cannot see our future so we can finally hear our own." Elena smiled, her eyes glistening with quiet hope. For the first time, the painful memory of Damien's rejection no longer felt like the end of her story. It felt like the beginning of her freedom. At that very moment, the silver ring resting in her hand released one final pulse of gentle light. Across the still surface of the lake, ancient symbols hidden beneath the water slowly appeared, forming a luminous pathway leading toward a distant island that had not existed only moments before. Every elder turned toward the miraculous sight. Rowan's joyful expression softened into quiet amazement. Kale remained completely still, though his eyes reflected deep recognition. "The path of remembrance," he whispered. "It has answered only twice in all of Lycan history. The forgotten truth is ready to reveal itself, but this time it will choose who is worthy to receive it." Elena stood at the edge of the glowing pathway as gentle waves carried silver light across the ancient lake, each shimmering step inviting her toward the island that had remained hidden for centuries. No one urged her forward. None of the elders whispered advice. Even Rowan remained silent, sensing that this decision belonged to Elena alone. She looked at the radiant path, then at Kale Draven standing only a few feet away. His expression held the same quiet patience that had never once asked her to become someone she was not. Finally, she spoke with complete honesty. "My entire life, I believed I needed someone powerful to choose me before I could believe I mattered. But during this journey, I discovered something far more important. I have to choose the person I become before anyone else can truly walk beside me." Kale's silver eyes softened with unmistakable respect. Then you already understand the oldest lesson my people have protected. Elena smiled gently. I do. She stepped onto the first stone of silver light. The pathway did not test her strength or demand any display of power. Instead, every step filled her heart with peaceful memories she had nearly forgotten. She saw herself comforting frightened animals as a little girl. She remembered helping elderly neighbors carry heavy baskets through winter snow. She saw the moment she chose kindness for the lost wolf cub without asking who he was. None of those moments had seemed extraordinary at the time. Yet together they formed the quiet truth of the person she had always been. When Elena reached the small island, a single, white tree stood beneath the mysterious second moon, its branches glowing softly like living starlight. Resting among its roots was an ancient stone carved with the same crescent symbol carried by her pendant and ring. As she gently placed her hand upon the weathered surface, warm silver light spread through the island and across the entire valley. Every elder bowed their heads in silent gratitude. The forgotten symbols hidden throughout the sacred sanctuary awakened together, not with overwhelming force, but with peaceful brilliance that wrapped the valley in hope. A calm voice seemed to rise with the breeze itself. The promise is renewed through compassion freely given. Elena closed her eyes as tears of quiet joy filled them. For the first time, she understood that she had never been forgotten by destiny. She had simply been guided toward a future where her worth would never depend upon another person's approval. When she returned across the luminous pathway, Kale waited exactly where she had left him. He neither reached for her hand nor assumed her answer. He simply smiled. Elena stepped toward him of her own choice. I cannot promise what tomorrow will bring, she said softly. But I know this. I do not wish to walk toward it alone. Kale placed one hand over his heart and bowed his head with sincere gratitude. That is more precious than any crown. Rowan laughed with pure happiness before running to embrace them both, while the white wolves lifted their voices in a gentle chorus that echoed peacefully through the mountains. Far away, in Raven Hollow, Alpha Damien looked toward the northern horizon as the strange second moon illuminated the evening sky. For reasons he could not explain, he finally understood that what he had released had never truly belonged to him. Elena had not lost her destiny on the night she was rejected. She had found the freedom to discover it. As twilight settled across the ancient valley, the glowing pathway slowly disappeared beneath the calm waters, but beyond the distant northern mountains, another silver light quietly awakened. Somewhere in lands untouched by either Alpha or Lycan kingdoms, an ancient gate covered in. Forgotten symbols shimmered beneath the stars for the first time in countless generations, promising that the oldest mysteries of the moon goddess had only just begun to reveal themselves.